the News Channel 5 network, this is MorningLine with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. We've got a good show on tap on this Thursday. Really interesting. Before the show, I'm talking with my guest, who I'll introduce to you in a moment. But the concept of a lot of cities around the country are wrestling with the very issue of not just the growth, but the type of things that happen along roadways. I mean, who would have imagined years ago food trucks? And, they are now an entrenched part of our life. All the different vehicles that are on our roads. And then not beyond that, the vendors on the streets, so the folks selling the contributor, and then a layer on top of that, how about those Lime and Bird scooters that are everywhere now? And I'm talking about what you see in the city of Nashville, and a lot of it's pretty darn cool. Some of it may be a little bit too much, maybe, and the public safety issue of it all comes into play. How often have you, maybe when you've been driving, come very close, or maybe realizing someone's selling the contributor or something else, and they're in the roadway, and you almost hit them, and you don't want to, and you're abiding by the law, but it's so congested, and if you swerve out, you get in the way of another car. All these issues come into play. How much is too much, and should limits be placed on some of it? There are some limits out there, but should more be done? We're going to talk about that this morning, about an ordinance that's not going anywhere, it looks like, in Metro, but he's certainly not giving up on it. It's Metro Councilman Steve Glover. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Good
You yourself said you were surprised we were going to have you on today necessarily because your ordinance, which I'll let you tell us about, doesn't look like it's going to go anywhere in the Metro Council, but you're going to continue pushing it at the state level. But yeah, talk about your ordinance. The reason we're having you on is I think it's still something everyone's talking and thinking about, whether they're for your ordinance idea or against it. We live it every day, and it's not just in Nashville, it's in cities across the country and across Tennessee. What would your ordinance do?
Well, basically what it says is you can't walk out into the streets.
Okay.
You can't be asking for money out in the streets.
Can you be on the sidewalk?
Yeah, you can be on the sidewalk all you want to. You can't walk out in the streets and transfer a piece of merchandise through a car window.
Okay.
And so, one of the reasons I had this about 3.5 years ago, filed it, very similar bill. We changed the language up on this one because it's gotten worse, and we've had a couple of deaths that specifically deal with street vendors.
Yeah.
See, everybody called this the paper bill, and I'm not even going to use the name of the paper because, frankly, that's really not the problem. The problem is everything else that we deal with every day in this city. And, we take the easy route of saying, well, we're going to go ahead and beat you on first reading. We're going to go ahead and do this. We're going to do that. Meanwhile, the problem doesn't go away. So I'm going to go to the state because so many of our roads here in Nashville are state roads, and so I mean it's a public safety issue. Them walking out in traffic, people walking out in traffic.
Okay, but let's stop you there. And you're right. I mean, when you say that, and when you say handing it through the window, my mind immediately goes to the contributor. All right. I mean, I just did. It happened to me yesterday. I bought one, and that's one thing. Now I suppose other people are selling other things.
They're not really selling other things, but they'll use a piece of paper, or they'll do this, they'll do that in order to try and get around the First Amendment piece of freedom of information.
Okay,
and freedom of speech.
But that's part of it, and I agree. I know you're not just zeroing in on that, and the contributor has its place and does a nice job. It's just you don't like the idea of it maybe creating a safety hazard.
Well, here's the bottom line: count. Most people don't pay attention. Right. If you, and I'm not saying that rudely, I'm just simply saying, if you drive down the road, if you'll look at the number of people that are in the streets asking for money or doing this or doing that, the contributor really doesn't occupy the majority of the space.
Okay, you're saying there's a lot of others.
There's a lot of others.
Begging. There's the famous one, the guy out there, need beer.
Yeah.
Those kind of signs.
Yeah. But they're standing out in the median. They're creating a public safety issue, and unfortunately, our police department doesn't really have a clear ordinance that says, "Look, you can ticket them, you can do this, you can do that," and what several in the council will say is, well, there's already laws on the books.
Right, aren't there? I mean, you're not supposed to be in the roadway with traffic coming. That's at the very least jaywalking or crossing at not a set place. I thought it's already on the books.
Well, on certain pieces of it. But what my bill would have cleaned it up a little bit more to where if you do have somebody who's walking out that is able to sell stuff off the sidewalk, and when they walk out in the street, it becomes illegal. Well, we're turning a blind eye to it. Meanwhile, we've had a couple of deaths.
Right.
Here's the other issue. and this is one of the things that also really started increasing the number of calls I was getting off of the amount of trash that it's creating at these intersections.
What's meaning that they're just leaving debris behind? Some of these folks doing this.
Yeah, I'm kind of amazed you haven't seen it.
I see. You know, I live in the same area. I drive through your district all the time.
You drive right by it and don't really pay attention to it. But you know, as a district council person, you get these phone calls, you get these emails saying, "Go clean this up, go do this. You know, fix this piece of it." Well, so you have to look at the overall issue to determine how do you fix it. And so the only way to really fix it is to say you can't walk out into the streets and do donations or do this in order to create the safety hazard, because it basically, what they're saying, this is my job. Well, if it's your job, let's just go ahead and take your job here. All right? So you have your desk.
Right.
You have your trash can and everything.
Sure.
If there's not somebody who's coming in behind you, are you throwing your trash in there every day and you just leave it there? And if it stacks up all throughout the office or the cubicle or whatever, it's okay. I think at some point the people here in the area or here in your building would start complaining about that.
Well, I would take it out myself.
Well, yeah, but the problem is it's not happening. They're walking out into the middle of the street. Again, you know, if the contributor would help be a part of the solution as opposed to, you know, turning on the red lights and, you know, calling me the various names they've called me or had their, you know, folks attacking me, then we actually could actually find a way to fix this, but they don't want to do it. They like their model. They don't want us telling them how to do anything. They don't want to regulate it. They say they do. Okay?
Well, they don't want anyone, and like I know many of the folks who sell them, and they're very nice. I buy the paper quite often. I would think that they want to be safe too. You know, I mean, they don't want the people selling them to be hurt.
Well, I agree with you, but you know, the part that's bothered me most about this bill and the last one, it always gets labeled, and it's by the media, the contributor bill. It is not the contributor bill.
I understand what you're saying. It's just not. Now, here's the thing. You're right. I think the answer is what you just hit on, be it the contributor or others, if there's organizations, a lot of them are just private individuals, is them deciding to self-regulate to some degree. Because even if an ordinance like this passes, or you say it's on the books now, when you sat down, said, look, Metro Police are already some 90 officers short anyway. How are you going to enforce it as it is? With everything else Metro PD is dealing with, these folks on the sides of the road, that's small potatoes. And you may be right, but they're not going to spend resources dealing with that.
And I understand that piece of it. So when you sit down and you look at yourself as a city, you have to look at the overall public safety elements of the city. Being short the number of officers we are right now, this bill doesn't fix that. But if it helps to highlight the overall problem we have in a shortage of officers, then hopefully we'll do that. I mean, we at some point have got to get our act together here in Nashville, because we're doing a pretty lousy job of it.
Just before we go to the break, I know this wasn't part of your ordinance, but you heard me in the opening talk about just how much is out there now. I just wonder, what do you think of Lime and Bird scooters?
Well, I think the way it was supposed to have been, and the way that it was presented, and the way that you know, we kind of let them back in to do what they said they were going to do, I think it's failing.
You think it's failing? All right, because I mean, the idea of it, the concept, fine. To me, it's another layer of congestion. And then you see some of these videos, like that one idiot that was on video that was released. He just didn't even pause, and the poor guy in the Beamer hits him, wasn't speeding or anything. And thankfully, the guy on the scooter was not seriously injured, which was amazing. You see that video? No. He flew up in the air, and I'm like, but this, it's almost like you should have a license to have to ride one of these things. He didn't even stop. Right through a busy intersection, got nailed. Didn't have a whole lot of sympathy for him. I'm glad he wasn't hurt. But come on. And that's where, as a driver in this town, and I come in every day, it would break my heart to hit some of those people selling something because I didn't see them, or they're in where they shouldn't be.
And I want to talk about that.
Or I hit someone on a scooter, even if it's their fault. And we all know, if you're the one in the car hitting someone, even if they're wrong, you're the one that's going to get hammered. And
see, that's the other
concern
piece
for me. Well, I would think the constituents are on board on this. So why doesn't the rest of the council?
Because it's real easy to take this route. Because the constituents don't necessarily have a unified voice on the ones that are against people walking in the street. But I'll tell you, between the scooters, this, and some other issues as far as the safety piece, you're spot on. And nobody's talking about the lives, I'm not going to say that are ruined, but the lives that are affected drastically by that individual who accidentally hit somebody, and it's not their fault.
Well, I'll tell you, as we go to the break, I know of one location that we've talked about in your district that I drive by every, and sweet woman who sells them, but she's there in an area that I'm fearful, and she's been doing it for a couple of years now, that she's going to, whenever I know I'm coming that in, I slow way down below the speed limit, and I do everything I can to give her a wide berth because I'm terrified of hitting and hurting her. And she's a wonderful, sweet lady, but boy, she seems to me sometimes to be in harm's way. Listen, we'll take a break. When we come back, the number 737-7587. What do you think? All right, he had the ordinance. It's going nowhere right now.
Well, it is. I mean, I'm going to the state.
Okay.
We're gonna see if we can't at least deal with the state
If
roads.
we could find something everyone kind of agreed to, I think everyone
that
would like
requires
to see.
us talking.
I know. Safety, I think everyone wants to be safe and not hurt. I think everyone would agree on that. The best way to do it, we'll see. Look, we'll take a break, and we've got some calls coming in already. How do you feel about it? What are your thoughts? We'll take a break, take your calls, and more of a conversation with a good councilman right after this.
To our annual